Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The shrill ring of my phone pierced the serene afternoon, driving me out of the comforting silence of my home office. I glanced at the screen. Ethane. My stepfather rarely called, and when he did, it was rarely good news. I hesitated before answering, a sense of unease prickling at the back of my mind. Rosemary, his voice crackled through the line, heavy and unsteady. I sold the summer house. The words hit me like a freight train. You what? I managed, my voice trembling. I had no choice, he continued, ignoring the rising anger in my tone. I needed the money to cover some debts. You mean your gambling debts? I snapped, my fingers tightening around the phone. How could you, Ethane? That house isn't just yours to sell. It's mine too, and Robert's. Did you forget about the co-ownership agreement? It's not like I had a choice. He barked, his tone shifting to defensive. Do you think I wanted this? I stood, pacing the room as a flood of memories surged forward. The summer house wasn't just property, it was a piece of my heart. Summers spent in its sunlit rooms with my late mother, laughter echoing off the walls, the scent of freshly cut grass and lilacs in the air. You had no right, I said, my voice steely. I'll make sure of that. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling as I dialed Robert's number. He picked up on the second ring. Rosemary, what's wrong? His voice carried concern. It's Ethane, I said, my voice shaky. He sold the summer house to cover his gambling debts. What? Robert's tone sharpened. He can't do that. We co-own it, remember? He needs my consent, and he doesn't have it. Relief flickered through me. So it's invalid? Legally, yes, Robert confirmed. But we need proof of the sale and his intent. Meet me at my office in an hour. By the time I arrived, Robert had already pulled out our co-ownership agreement. The leather binding of his portfolio slammed shut as he handed me a copy. This document makes the sale illegal. Let's figure out what he's done. We sifted through financial documents and emails, Robert's sharp eyes catching every inconsistency. It wasn't long before we stumbled upon a hastily signed agreement between Ethane and an anonymous buyer. Look at this, Robert said, pointing to the blurry signature. He didn't even go through a proper notary. This reeks of desperation. I clenched my fists. What do we do? We send him a cease and desist letter immediately, Robert replied. It'll halt the sale and force him to explain himself. Let me draft it now. An hour later, I watched Robert's fingers fly across the keyboard, crafting a letter that would freeze Ethane's reckless move in its tracks. My heart raced as I imagined the confrontation ahead. We'll deliver this tomorrow, Robert said, printing the letter with a determined expression. He won't get away with this. I nodded, steeling myself. Ethane had underestimated me, and this time I wasn't backing down. The next morning, I stood at Ethane's front door, the cease and desist letter clutched in my hand. Robert was beside me, his presence a steady anchor. Ethane opened the door, his expression shifting from surprise to irritation. What's this about? He barked, glancing between us. You know exactly what this is about, I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I placed the letter on his coffee table with deliberate force. This is a formal notice invalidating your so-called sale of the summer house. Ethane's face darkened. I had no choice, Rosemary. I was drowning in debt. Then you should have come to me, I snapped. Instead, you tried to pull an illegal stunt. That house is co-owned, and you can't sell it without Robert's consent. Do you realize how serious this is? Robert interjected, his tone measured but firm. Ethane, this isn't just about money. This is fraud. The buyer can press charges. We're giving you one chance to retract the sale and fix this mess. Ethane's bravado faltered. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought. He trailed off, looking at me with pleading eyes. I didn't budge. You thought wrong. You'll contact the buyer today and void the sale. If you don't, we'll escalate this legally. You wouldn't do that, he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Try me, I said coldly. This is your mess, and you will clean it up. The room fell into a tense silence. Ethane finally sighed and nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Fine. I'll fix it. Robert and I exchanged a glance. It wasn't over, but it was a start. The office was quiet except for the rustle of papers and the faint hum of Robert's laptop. We had spread everything across the table: real estate listings, financial documents, and correspondence from the supposed buyer. My frustration simmered as I flipped through the pages, searching for the smoking gun we needed. There, Robert said suddenly, pointing to a line on the buyer's email. They mentioned a cash deposit. That's unusual for a property like this, especially under the radar. We need to check the county records. Without hesitation, I grabbed my phone. I'll call Detective Dominique Gerald. He's already interested in this case. This might be the leverage we need. As I explained the situation to the detective, Robert pulled up the real estate agent's listing for the property. Rosemary, he said, his tone sharp. The agent filed this sale 3 days before Ethane even told you. This wasn't desperation. It was premeditated. My grip on the phone tightened. Detective Gerald, I'll bring you everything. This is bigger than we thought. 2 hours later, we sat in Gerald's office, presenting the evidence. He leaned back in his chair, studying the documents. You've got a strong case here. Ethane's actions are fraudulent, and the buyer could face penalties too if they were complicit. So what happens next? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Gerald looked up. We'll void the sale and initiate charges against Ethane. But I'll need formal statements from both of you and any additional documentation you can find. Robert nodded. We'll get you everything by tomorrow. As we left the station, a small sense of relief began to creep in. The summer house wasn't out of reach yet, and Ethane's recklessness was finally catching up to him. Let's finish this, Robert said, his determination mirroring my own. Detective Gerald arrived at my apartment the next morning, a thick folder tucked under his arm. We've got what we need, he said with a sharp nod. The forged signatures, the under-the-table agreements, it's all here. Robert and I leaned over the dining table as Gerald spread out the evidence. Among the papers were forged copies of my signature and shady email exchanges between Ethane and a desperate buyer. This isn't just fraudulent, Gerald continued, it's criminal. We're moving forward with charges. The next step involved presenting our findings to the local prosecutor's office. Gerald's meticulous report and Robert's witness statement solidified the case. As we waited for updates, a sense of determination fueled our actions. Each document and statement was another nail in the coffin of Ethane's scheme. A week later, Gerald called. Ethane has been arrested, he announced. He confessed to orchestrating the sale under false pretenses. Given the evidence, he's facing charges of fraud and misrepresentation. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So, it's over. Not just over, Gerald replied, but justice served. The air smelled of fresh paint and pine as Robert and I stood in the summer house's living room. Sunlight streamed through the cleaned windows, illuminating the room we'd worked tirelessly to restore. The memories of my childhood felt alive again, no longer overshadowed by Ethane's betrayal. Robert set down a box of books on the refurbished oak shelf. "You know," he began, wiping his hands on his jeans, "I thought this place might never feel the same after everything. But it does." I ran my fingers over the mantel, the smooth wood newly polished. "It's more than the same, Robert. It's stronger. Like me." He chuckled. "Always poetic." He grinned, pulling me into a hug. "You did it, Rose. You fought for what mattered. And won." Outside, the first notes of dusk painted the sky. The house stood as a testament to resilience, a symbol of what I had reclaimed. For the first time in years, I felt free, ready to embrace the life I'd built with those who truly cared for me.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.